Hello and very warm welcome to the Arise interview, 60 minutes of multifaceted discussions where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and we'll feature the voices at the heart of the stories. I am Christian Ogodo, and thanks for joining us. Coming up in the next hour, U.S. President Donald Trump has been impeached but is still the President of the United States. And what comes next is a trial in the Senate that could but won't cost him the White House. Republicans compared President Trump's plight to when Jesus Christ was falsely accused of treason by Pontius Pilate. We'll look at how the historic vote went down with the House of Representatives using its constitutional rights to charge Donald Trump with high crimes of misdemeanors through votes on 2 articles of impeachment that will be familiar at this point to most Americans and now headed for the history books. And later, Nigeria's 9th National Assembly has often been described as a rubber stamp one. Though, in the last 6 months of its inauguration, the Senate has passed 6 bills into laws, 4 of them members' bills. We'll assess the performance of the legislative arm of government in a moment. Donald Trump has become the 3rd U.S. president to be impeached. The House of Representatives voted to impeach him on both charges of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress after hours of debate. After minutes of the crucial vote, the process was thrown into confusion when House Speaker Nancy Pelosi refused to say when or whether she will send the articles of impeachment to the Senate for trial. But first, here is Speaker Nancy Pelosi speaking a moment after the historic vote in the House to impeach President Donald Trump.
Right now, the president is impeached. We're not having that discussion. We have done what we have set out to do. The House has acted on a very sad day to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, to do so in a manner that was fair, even though the other side was mischaracterizing it. Nonetheless, it was fair and appropriate and urgent. So we will make our decision as to when we're going to send it when we see what they're doing on the Senate side. But that's a decision that we will make jointly. Okay, you're starting to act like another country. Don't shout, okay? Who's not going to shout a question? Yes, sir.
Guarantee that the impeachment articles will be at some point sent to the Senate.
I'm not.
Guarantee that.
That would have been our intention, but we'll see what happens over there.
So you may not.
That is not. You're asking me, are we all going to go out and play in the snow? That has not been part of our conversation. That has not been part of our conversation. Excuse me, what? I'm sorry, dear. No, I've never raised the prospect. You asked the question. I never raised the prospect. I said we're not sending it tonight because it's difficult to determine who the managers would be until we see the arena in which we will be participating. That's all I said. I never raised the prospect. Well, we'll see when they come forward. It's up to the Senate to say what their rules will be. My colleagues, do you want to say anything about this? Because it is, this is a serious matter. Even though the majority leader in the United States Senate says it's okay for the foreman of the jury to be in cahoots with the lawyers of the accused. That doesn't sound right to us. But let's see when they understand what we have acted, and now they'll understand what their responsibilities are, and we'll see what that is. But I never raised that possibility. No. What I don't consider a fair trial. This is what I don't consider a fair trial. that Leader McConnell has stated that he's not an impartial juror, that he's going to take his cues, in quotes, from the White House, and he is working in total coordination with the White House counsel's office. Any comments, my colleagues, on that?
All right, that was House Speaker Nancy Pelosi there after the vote for impeachment. Well, for more on these, I've now been joined from our Washington studios by Rise correspondent Rotimi Michael Kade, and in our Abuja studios, by our Rise News correspondent Carl Bostic. Gentlemen, very warm welcome to the Arise interview. I'm going to start with you, Rotimi. You're on ground there in Washington, just around the Capitol Hill. You want to quickly tell us what the reaction has been since this impeachment vote was taken, or since President Donald Trump has been impeached?
A very good question, Christian, and thank you very much for having me. I think the reaction here has been of that of a divided nation. You've seen people who actually wanted the president to be impeached, and you have also people who are also against the impeachment of the president. So when you look at the polls is looking like a 50-50 on both sides. But having said that, the political Game of Thrones, I mean, in Washington, D.C. Is obviously one that actually gets a lot of attention all around the world, and particularly now that impeachment is taking place, and the next battleground will be in the Senate. And from what we heard this morning from Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, he definitely felt that this impeachment is the thinnest and of all impeachment, the articles of impeachment, which of course will be presented to the Senate, but not anytime soon, because what you heard from Nancy Pelosi there, that Mitch McConnell has already taken position on who to support, and he's in lockstep with the White House on how this trial is going to go. Now, Nancy Pelosi wants a more better and fairer trial in the Senate. But there have been so many arguments about it, whether she has the jurisdiction to do that. They are both independent houses. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, yes, she can, withhold the articles of impeachment in perpetuity, but she doesn't have powers on how to set the rules in the Senate. So the battleground will definitely be in the Senate, where Mitch McConnell and Schumer would be definitely locking horns on how to get to settle, or perhaps maybe find a common ground. But I mean, generally, the temperature has been very high in Washington. A lot of people are watching closely what will be the next step.
Rotimi, thanks for that. But only yesterday, President Trump had a rally, and is sounded so unrepentant and very nonchalant about what was going on, and using very insipid language, caustic one, to address even both the living and the dead. How, what are the implications of this, for him, even if this matter goes to the Senate and McConnell is taking the position already? Rotimi?
Well, from what we saw yesterday at a rally in Michigan, the president definitely did not look like a president that was impeached. And from some of these tirades and this diatribe over how the process had gone, it shows that he's very unremorseful about his action. He still insists that he has done absolutely nothing wrong, that he called Democrats all sorts of names, and of course, most importantly, calling John Dingell a long-term lawmaker. I mean, he's the longest serving lawmaker in U.S. history, a World War II hero, and somebody who was well respected in Michigan. And of course, calling him all sort of names, and of course, using derogatory terms like is looking up from hell, really caused a lot of outrage in the country and also on Twitter. when the wife, who also is a representative in Congress, Debbie Dingell, actually made some very remarkable comments on Twitter over the comments of Mr. President, and she received a lot of support, from people. That could really change the game for Donald Trump in Michigan, because when you look at 2016 elections, Michigan obviously was overwhelmingly won by Trump. But with that comment yesterday about the late congressman, that could change a lot of things. We really don't know. But I mean, the president is still on a Twitter tirade from yesterday up till this morning, and it does appear that he's definitely looking up to what will happen in the Senate. But it's still on a shaky ground for him. It all depends on whether Schumer or perhaps maybe Mitch McConnell will concede to some of the demands of Nancy Pelosi. That is perhaps maybe one of the unlikely things to see in Washington. So right now we're in a state of sort of conundrum. You're either going forward or going backward, but maybe as time goes on, we're going to be seeing a lot of changes.
Yes, a lot of changes. I've really followed not just the debate, but the voting patterns and the rest, with the House divided against itself, and even Americans divided on this. But Rotimi, you want to tell us the president is still stonewalling, and what do you think Nancy Pelosi would be doing with the articles? Some give and take to the Senate so that some key people could still testify? Is that on the cards? Rotimi?
Well, I think it's really on the card, but I mean, as I said earlier, Nancy Pelosi, I think our work actually stopped at the impeachment yesterday. The next, port of call will be in the Senate, but there've been some sort of conditionalities, some preconditions to the articles of impeachment transmission to the Senate. The minority leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, actually demands that Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney should testify, and of course a former security advisor, John Bolton, should also testify amongst others, which also looking very, very unlikely, because from what we've heard from Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate, he felt that the sloppiness in the articles of impeachment from the House cannot be completed in the Senate. So there's absolutely no reason, as I said, is actually working in cahoots with the White House. This is quite unprecedented. And when you look at the Clinton impeachment, you have, White House cooperating from day one. But what we've seen here is that Donald Trump has stonewalled the process. One of the reasons, the second article, which is the abuse of Congress, emanated from that, because the Congress, dominated by the Democrats, felt like the president stopped over 70 subpoenas, and of course he also did not provide documentary evidence, which could perhaps maybe get him out of the particular position he is, or he was then.
Yeah.
And most likely that is going to continue as we move forward.
Rotimi, I'm so sorry. We'll have to go now because we want to take some commercials, but very warm appreciation there. Rotimi Michael Tade, a Rise News correspondent in Washington. You're still watching the Arise interview. We've got more still ahead. Stay with us. You're welcome back, and you're still watching the Arise interview with me, Christian Ogdo. Thanks for staying with us. Being impeached places Donald Trump alongside only two other presidents in the nation's history, that is American history, Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton. The first charge is abuse of power stemming from Mr. Trump's alleged attempt to pressure Ukraine to announce investigations into his Democratic political rival, Joe Biden. It passed by 230 votes to 197, almost completely on party lines. Only two Democrats opposed, The second charge is obstruction of Congress because the president already refused to cooperate with the impeachment inquiry, withholding documentary evidence and barring his key aides from giving evidence. It passed by 229 to 198 votes. Here is Donald Trump speaking at a rally.
Illegal, unconstitutional, and partisan impeachment. The do-nothing Democrats, and they are do-nothing. All they want to do is focus on this. What they could be doing are declaring their deep hatred and disdain for the American voter. This lawless partisan impeachment is a political suicide march for the Democrat Party. Have you seen my polls in the last 4 weeks? It's crazy. You know why? Because people, we have an election right down the road. I announced 3 months ago that I'm running, right? I'll give you a little clue. I announced because I figured once they announced they'd never impeach, nobody would be so stupid. But they've been trying to impeach me from day one. Through their depraved actions today, crazy Nancy Pelosi's House Democrats have branded themselves with an eternal mark of shame, and it really is. It's a disgrace.
Unrepentant and unperturbed President of the United States there. Impeached President of the United States, Donald Trump. So for more on the developing story there, I have with me in the studios a Rise News correspondent, Carl Bostic. Carl, he's unrepentant, he's unperturbed. Does he really know the implications of being impeached as a president of the United States?
Well, that's so striking about this, Christian, because every day, just when you thought that things were predictable, when there was no suspense in terms of the outcome of the vote in the House, we get new twists and turns. In other words, I think one of the interesting aspects of this whole impeachment, apart from other impeachments, is that for the first time we have a president, as you said in your own words, who's not expressing any remorse, any contrition. We had Richard Nixon, who resigned before he could be impeached. He resigned because he saw what it was doing to the country. You had Bill Clinton apologizing after he was impeached and trying to show what he could do for the country because of that. In fact, Christian, let's just take a look at just the history of impeachment in the U.S. I think we've got a slide to show you of just how historic and unfortunately, well, how rare this is for American history if we're looking at that now.
Yeah.
So we're looking at Andrew Johnson, 1868, Christian. He became president after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. He was the vice president. That's why he took it on. He was actually a white supremacist, Christian, and he was against really getting rights to freed American slaves back then, so much so that he fired a cabinet member who was trying to bring American slaves up to the same playing field as whites in the South. And that led to these impeachment articles, quite frankly. So he was impeached on 11 articles. You've got Richard Nixon in 1974. He actually resigned because members of his own party marched to the White House saying, "We don't have the votes to support you, sir. You will either be not only impeached, but also convicted." And that's why he then said, "You guys won't have me to kick around anymore." That's why he resigned, because he saw the numbers. But that was also a bipartisan effort, Christian. You had Democrats and members of his own party
agreeing together.
With Bill Clinton in 1998, that was a personal indiscretion, having an affair
with an intern.
With an intern, okay? Yeah. And once again,
he never breached any article of the Constitution.
Well,
it was just a moral issue.
The Constitution specifies 3 categories. 2 are very specific. One is bribery, treason. Those are 2 specifics. The third is high crimes and misdemeanors. So this felt in the category of high crimes and misdemeanors in that respect. In fact, you could call it moral turpitude, shall we say. But in this case, once again, Christian, you had members of his own party, the Democrats, against what he did, who were morally troubled. So much so, it was a bipartisan vote for impeachment, okay? But when it came to the Senate, that threshold, that bar is very high, and he was acquitted. So there you have, it was bipartisan up until today. For the first time, you showed us that slide, Christian, just now of the vote from last night, where 197, 198 members of the House voted not to impeach him. Well, that reflects every single Republican in the House. There were 197 Republicans in the House. One Democrat at the last minute defected to the Republican side. The Republicans did not break ranks at all. So it showed nothing but complete solidarity. So for the first time, if there's one or two takeaways coming from this, Christian, is you have partisanship like you've never seen before for the first time, number one. And secondly, this is no longer the Republican Party. It's no longer the party of Abraham Lincoln, who was Republican. It's the party of Donald Trump. And I think one troubling...
I was going to ask that. The Republican Party, do they really have one voice, or Trump just, marshals over them?
Well, what that voice is part of what you saw last night, Christian. Where was he? He was in Michigan. A battleground state, with these diehard fans and supporters. His support amongst Republicans, registered Republicans nationally, Christian, is about 90%. So all the people, all the Republicans officials in the Senate and congressmen, they're voting for him not only because of his support in the base, because they don't want to lose their careers or jobs, but also he has delivered, even if you have to hold your nose. In other words, he's given them more than 100 federal judgeships around the country. Those are lifetime appointments. That's going to affect things such as reproductive rights, for example, Christian. He's given them tax reforms that basically favors the wealthy. So there's no equitable distribution of wealth. And he's also appointed 2 Supreme Court justices, the highest court in the land, 2 lifetime appointments. So he's delivered on those goods, and he's trying to build a wall in Mexico. So quite honestly, Christian, what you see going on right now is, it's very interesting. You have a situation where you have 2 different parties not even agreeing on the same set of facts.
Because the Republicans are happy with their president.
Exactly. So they're doing whatever spinning they can do. They're talking about due process. He's likening himself to, he says, I've been persecuted more than Jesus Christ or than the Salem witch trial, which of course
what a blasphemous analogy coming from the Republicans in their defense here.
I'm sorry, say that?
I said, what a blasphemous analogy coming from the Republicans in defense of Donald Trump.
Well, again, you almost have to be a contortionist at this point, Christian, especially if you're evangelical supporting Donald Trump, because the argument they're making right now, he's not perfect, he's flawed, but he has delivered on, in terms of example for Israel, Christian, he's delivered on the promise to have the U.S. Embassy move to Jerusalem. That's happened. And so from their point of view, the ideal Christian for us may not be the one who is an angel. He's not an angel in that sense. They're looking past distorted affairs.
Yeah.
So it's pretty bad. But if you want to get into also the matter of just why is the country so divided like never before, we should just look at how the polls were. We have some numbers to show you, Christian.
Okay.
If someone can show us those numbers, if we can looking at them now, just days before, that was in October.
Yeah.
In October, that's where America stood for those polled by Washington Post and ABC News. 49% saying he should be impeached and removed, 47% saying he should not be impeached and removed. Those are the numbers back then. Did those numbers change after 2 months of testimony, from civil servants and political appointees? Let's look at December 17th. Almost virtually identical. They're just simply dug in with their positions. Nothing has changed. It's budged. And if you want to, ask why that has happened, there are lots of reasons why. But I think one clear, issue to keep in mind, Christian, is this. Compared to the days of Richard Nixon or Bill Clinton, what's new is this, the power and impact of social media. Back in the days of Richard Nixon, for example, there was no Fox News. If he'd had Fox News back then, he probably would have finished out his term, okay? Because you have a day right now, Christian, where more and more Americans do not get their information from the main broadcast networks like ABC, NBC, CBS. When Bill Clinton was being impeached, CNN was just getting its legs started.
Absolutely.
CNN was just, introducing the phenomenon of 24/7 cable news.
Yeah.
But now what you have a cable news environment. Not only that, you've got social media. You've got a president another first for Donald Trump. You have the first impeached president who's tweeting live during his impeachment. While you had a witness in the House committee hearing, testifying, he was tweeting his feedback, basically intimidating her.
Yeah.
So, and he has a platform of 67 million followers, Christian. What I'm saying is this: you have people who are no longer dialing into CBS, ABC, NBC, or whatever. It's, you know, their appointment is with Fox News or with his Twitter platform, things like that. So you're looking at two alternate realities, two alternate universes about where they get the facts from. No one's even talking about the facts of whether or not he was leveraging congressionally appropriated military aid for Ukraine, nearly $400 million. No one's talking about that fact, or the fact that a White House visit was being withheld. They're talking about the unfairness of it all.
All right, the unfairness of it all. That's what the morals of what they are looking at. But very quickly, in just about 30 seconds, Carl, tell us, what's the implication of this impeachment for his running, you know, seeking a second term?
Well, you're almost opening a Pandora's box there, Christian, because never before, everything is in uncharted waters. We've never had a situation, and again, it's historical, where a president who's been impeached is up for re-election. And the thing about it, if it was any other president, he would be favored to win re-election. The economy is booming. You've got record low unemployment.
Yeah.
The stock market is booming. And yet, this deep into his presidency, no other president has been as unpopular as Donald Trump. So that really is the conundrum there. And I guess the final thing is that people are worried that, you know, if he is acquitted by the Senate, he may be emboldened to keep doing what he's doing to guarantee his re-election.
All right, Carl Bostic, a Rise News analyst, their correspondent. Thanks so very much. I wish we had more time. But I'm sure across the other bulletins, you'd be making your point. You're still watching the Arise interview. We've got more still ahead. Stay with us.